All right, today we're working with plugins. And so to prepare for this, I wrote a plugin, and we'll go through what I did and step by step. And I think you'll find that it's a pretty epic plugin. Actually, before we get into this, I want to show you guys something. So if you look at day one, you see I have my YouTube video here. The same thing with day two. YouTube video.
Now, are you embedding those into some sort of plugin, or are you actually putting it in?
Neither. So WordPress has this kind of built-in thing. You just put the YouTube link in your post, just as regular text. It converts it automatically. I forget what it's called. It's basically like this. There's a page on WordPress.org about it. Embed is what it's called. You can do a YouTube video, a bunch of other stuff. You can create your own custom ones. It's just something kind of neat. A lot of people use plugins for it. They don't know that you can just put the URL of the YouTube video and it will automatically do it for you. So I just want to show you guys that's how I'm doing that particular thing. Yeah. Okay. Plugins. There's one file required in a plugin, and it's just pluginname.php. You can put it in a folder. If you do, it should be the same name as the folder. If you want your plugin hosted in the WordPress plugin repository, you also need to include a readme.txt file. So if you open this up, this is the plugin repository. It has all the plugins. And this is just an example of what a readme would look like. Plugin name, contributor, donate link, all this information. Frequently asked questions, screenshots, what you changed. And so like this is a heading, or actually this is a plugin name heading. This is a tab heading. So if we look at Jetpack, description, installation, description, installation. Frequently asked questions, screenshots, just different pictures.
So that's where it's pulling that information from this file right here?
Yeah. So if you want it hosted on the plugin repository, you need a readme.txt. There is a number of coding standards that I recommend you go through, look at. This will just help you make your code look pretty. This has drastically helped me make my code look pretty. Much more readable, easier to do things. It's just generic guidelines. It doesn't need to be perfect. They have a thing about inline documentation, which is just PHP doc tags. So you add this stuff above every function. You know, it says what the function does, what package it belongs to. And then you can run a PHP doc script on it. It will generate documentation for you. And then there's the writing a plugin page on the codex. And this just gives you a general introduction, what resources to use, how to create. So we went through the name of the plugin files, the README, And next week we'll talk about the header. So standard plugin information. At the top of your plugin's main PHP file, it should contain a standard plugin information header. It lets WordPress recognize that your plugin exists. It adds it to the plugin management screen so it can be activated, loaded, and it will run its functions. Without the header, your plugin will never be activated and will never run. So these are the header arguments: plugin name, URI, description, version. They're not all required, I don't believe. So if we look at the plugin page, all this information here is generated by the plugin.php's header information, all this information. So we have an example, and this is the plugin we're going to write. It's called Catnip. It's a simple WordPress plugin that shows a random picture of a cat from the cat API. As an example of the power of WordPress for this WordPress training. I'm the author, version 1.0. This is my author URL, and these are the tags. So when you publish a plugin to WordPress's repository, you can add these tags. So if somebody searches for the tag lolcat, it'll come up in the list.
Is there a limit on how many tags you put in?
Actually, yes. There didn't used to be, but I had a plugin that had like 30 tags in there, and it got taken off the plugin repository. And I looked into it, and they had added some guidelines saying no more than 12 because people were abusing the system.
And how much does your plugin have to be different from someone else's to be unique?
It doesn't. It can be exactly the same.
Really?
Yeah. I don't think they've changed that. But the whole point is that you can take a plugin and create your own version that does what you want. So if one of them isn't meeting a need that you have, you can change it. And maybe people will like that one more and download it. So let's create our Catnip plugin. Actually, let's take a look at this page. So with the cat API, there's documentation on how to use the API. We can get random images and put them on our blog or our website. So we could do this, and we're going to show you how to grab an API and stick it into or use the API to stick images and a shortcode on a page and also a widget. So create a new plugin, Catnip, and we'll create file, catnip.php, and this is header. Save it, upload, go to our plugin page. There it is, Catnip. Obviously, if I activate this, it's not going to do anything because there's no code.
Another question.
Yeah.
What makes plugins work well with individual sites versus plugins that won't work for multiple sites?
It depends on what the plugin does and how it's coded. A plugin that's coded well should work well with multi-site installations. Sometimes the way they access the database isn't proper because they're accessing a specific database for a single site rather than considering the blog ID that gets added to the table names on a multi-site installation. Users can be a problem, but there's a newish API, WP users, that helps with that drastically. It used to be that you had to query the database directly, And so you'd get users that weren't part of the blog or site ID that you're in, and that would cause problems. But it's just various things that can cause problems like that. All right, so we have the header on our plugin. The next thing I want to do is create an options page. So if you look at this general page, you know, these are the options for the general settings. Obviously, this isn't a plugin, it's built into WordPress. The options page is the easiest way to generate options for your plugin. It's not the only way. If you need extra functionality like this WordPress SEO plugin, it's its own menu and its own options pages, then you have to do a little bit more complicated stuff. But this will be the easiest way for us to learn the basics. So you need to pay attention to these functions: add options page, settings fields, do settings sections, register settings, add settings section, add settings field, and get options. So if we look at add options page, it requires you to run it on this action. We discussed actions last week. So when admin menu is called, we're going to call our function. And then our function calls this add options page, which takes the page title, the menu title. These are the permissions. So admin users have the capability to manage options. So we want to make sure that only admin users can see this page or can modify this page. So manage options is what they set here. A unique identifier, which is basically the menu slug. Which we look at settings and read. I guess it's not going to any of these. We'll show it to you when we do it. And then the function to call that will actually display the page. So, if we look at our example, this is not the page. So I stick us all in a class called catnip. And this is the action I'm calling, admin menu. It's called the add catnip admin page here, which calls the catnip options page. And this is it right here. So because of the cat API, we can have an API key. It's not necessary. The only option I care about is the API key. So it's going to be a pretty simple page for now. But first, this div, it's just the default div tag that all the options pages have in WordPress to help format things with the WordPress CSS. And then this is the default icon that they use. And this is the heading on the page, catnip options. One thing that we'll discuss a little bit today is the I-18N. We'll discuss it more next time because we don't have much time today to discuss it all. This is how WordPress handles internationalization. You can do _e for echo this output, or __ for return it as a string. So we're going to echo catnip options. And then we have a text domain called catnip. So if somebody wants to translate this file into Russian, they'll download a file called a .pot file, which we'll generate. And they can then create a Russian translation and send it to me. I can add it to our catnip plugin. And then somebody who has Russian language enabled on their WordPress site, when they go to our plugin settings, they'll see the catnip options in Russian. So it's just an easy way. It's really the best way to handle strings of text. The form action is options.php, and then we get into settings fields. So the settings field, it basically just prepares a group name for your settings. So ours is going to be called Get Plugin Options. And then we want to do the settings section, which will be called Catnip Options. So if we look at that, do settings sections. This will print all the sections of a particular settings page. So this right here, the page is the page you want to work with. So our page is Catnip Options. It's the same as the Add Options page. So you're saying do the settings for this page. And then we have a submit button. Again, this HTML markup is the same for all the WordPress settings pages. That way it just has the same look and feel of it. So, next thing we want to look at is registering our settings. Let's see here. So we have an action here, admin initialization, which calls catnip admin initialization, which calls register settings. The catnip plugin options, let's see what this says here. The option group that we named, I believe needs to be the same as the do settings. The option name, so I just have these the same. They don't have to be the same, I don't think. But this has to be the same as this. Wait, yeah. And then the validation function. So if you're passing an API key and you know that API key is always going to be 32 characters, you have your validation script check to make sure that what's being sent is 32 characters. Or if it's an email address, you want to check to make sure it's an email address or something like that. Our validation script isn't going to check anything because we don't have any important stuff that we're passing.
Would you use that to keep people from hacking in?
It wouldn't really be used. I mean, it's going to be used to help prevent sort of like cross-site scripting attacks and stuff like that. But the functionality that WordPress is doing here is going to do a lot of that for you anyway. It's really just to make sure that what they're inputting is valid, as far as you're asking them to input something and they're not understanding it right or something like that. Good question.
And I won't be able to see that page unless they're already a validated user of the.
Hopefully. Right. I mean, there may be a script on your site that allows a subscriber to get elevated privileges and change themselves to an administrator or something like that. So the next thing is add settings section. And again, these are all the codex pages. They explain everything in detail. So you need an ID, which is just part of the ID attribute tag. Title, the function that will be called, and the page it needs to be displayed on. So if we look at ours, the ID is the main plugin settings. So I just did cat plugin main. This is just going to be in the ID tag. The title is primary settings. And again, I did 2 underscores because I want this to be a string. And this is internationalized and ready to be translated. Main settings output is the function I want to call. And catnip options is the option name, which needs to be the same as this do settings section. And next is the setting field. So if you click on Settings API here, you'll see that there's a whole thing about the Settings API. And it goes in depth and it has a nice example like the one we've written here on how to do it. Add settings field asks for an ID, a title, a callback function. The page is supposed to display on. The section is supposed to display in, and the arguments. I don't think I've used this. Additional arguments we pass and callback function for label 4. So I guess it's just to label your stuff. Label 4. So if we look at ours, the cat API key. So this is a single setting in our page. We're going to get the API key. The name of the setting is the cat API key. Catnip is the this is a translatable string. That's the text domain that we're using for this translatable string. The cat API key input is the function we're calling. Catnip options is the option name. It needs to be the same as the do settings section. Catnip plugin main is the settings section here. And I don't have that extra variable name. So if we look at main settings output, which is this function, all we're outputting is the cat API settings. Basically, just like a description of the page. And then we look at the cat API key input. So we run this function called getOptions, and this will query the options table in the WordPress database for the key catnip plugin options, and it will get those options. So it's the option name. You can also have a default value. So if it doesn't find one, it will use a blank string or a certain key that you want everyone to use, or a certain variable you want everyone to use. But the default value is option. So for the cat API key input, we have an input field. Now this is important. We have our ID, which we have the same as this add settings field. This class is just a built-in WordPress backend styling thing. We have the name. The name, you see, is in an HTML array format. Catnip plugin options needs to be the same as this, and then in the brackets needs to be the value you want to store in the array. Type text value is options API key, which is got from here. And then I just added a little description that says it's optional, and you can get an API key by going to this URL. Now, above here, we had our validate statement. So catnip options validate. The function catnip options validate passes the input, and again, you want to get our options, and we just want to set it. We don't want to check because we don't really care what they put in there. If they put in something wrong, they'll have to fix it on their own. And then we return the options. By returning options, it is returning it back to WordPress, which is resetting this catnip plugin options value. So there's an update _ options that it runs on the information that's passed back. This is probably the best way to do it. There's other ways to do it if you're handling one variable, but this is the best, I think. If we wanted to add another settings field, like say we wanted to allow them to set a default image size for this API, we could copy and paste this and do the cat image size, image size. We need a new function, the cat API image size input. This is the same, and this is the same. So we have to write another function here and do all that work. So there's two different functions that get called for each of those settings, and all it does is output the actual input. It outputs the input. But to validate, there wouldn't be a second one. You just do, image size, and you validate it in some way. So since I added this as a class, I need it at the bottom. Could do it at the top. Catnip equals new catnip. So we save this and upload it. And we refresh our page. Should. Oh, I gotta activate it. There it is, catnip. Catnip, primary setting. Again, that was up here. Let's see, where was it? There we go. The settings section, primary settings. So this is a section right here, this whole area. The cat API settings is the description that we set, which was right here. So this settings section calls this main settings output, which outputs that description. You don't really need to output a description if you don't want to, but it is an option. And then this is our input variable that we created. So the add settings field that called this input field. We have the cat API key, which is the title of that input field. And then our input and our little description, so they can click here and they can get an API if they want. So we don't really need to do anything here with the save setting. If we wanted to add an API, let me see here. I think I had one that was 081. I'm not going to mess with it. Basically, with the API, you're able to get access to all images, but without it, you can only access the first 1,000 images. For our example, we just messed with the first 1,000 images. Does anyone have any questions so far?
This is the same way we could add function to a user's page, so that they could upload their own photos.
Similar, yes. Yeah. I think where am I? Yeah, if we look at this, Otto is a WordPress developer who's been with WordPress for a long time. And he goes through this almost the exact same tutorial. And I think at the bottom he discusses, this page is linked from the WordPress documentation, by the way, as a good example. Adding fields to other pages is basically the same thing. Right here. One last thing. So if you wanted to add a field, you could do it.
When you did administration, we would just say, for example,
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't understand about the, having to do the thing to activate it. Do you have to upload it to the WordPress in order to activate it?
No. The plugin will run fine if you upload it to your plugins directory.
Okay.
Registering it with the WordPress plugin repository just allows everyone to get access to it if you want them to. But if you don't want them to, you don't need the README file, and you don't need anything special. You do need this header text in order to activate it on your site.
Okay, so you have that and sticking it in the directory, has to do with
Yeah.
just writing a plugin.
Just running your own little plugin that you don't want anyone else to use or care about, then yeah.
If you just that folder where the plugin is created,
Mhm.
that's not, just do the upload, it automatically uploads.
Yeah. Yeah. And you can add it to any site that you want, and no one will know about it or have access to it. Which actually is not technically true. WordPress, it does reporting back to the servers to check to see if there's new versions of a plugin you have installed. So they would technically know that you have a plugin called Catnip on your system, but interesting story, I guess. If you have a plugin called Catnip in your site, and then somebody creates a plugin called Catnip and uploads it to the WordPress repository, it does something completely different and has a higher version number than the version number you have on your custom version that you made for yourself, years ago, you'll get an update notification saying there's an update for this plugin. There was a malicious plugin it was out on the web, and some people took it upon themselves to create a WordPress version in the repository, plugin repository, with the same name, a higher version number, so people would get a notification of an update for that plugin, which basically just deactivated the plugin. So, does that make sense? So you don't have to have it in a repository. In other words, you don't have to have it in a repository for it to work. You can, in fact, Gravity Forms is a WordPress plugin. It's not in the WordPress repository. It's a really great form building plugin. And because of the way that they charge for money, they don't offer a free version, they're not allowed in the WordPress repository. So it's a premium plugin. It's not in the WordPress repository, but it still works in WordPress fine. All right. So we need to write a little cat API for our plugin so we can actually use the cat API. And then we need to include it. So let's just look. I wrote one. The cat API does several things. You can get an image, you can vote on an image, you can favorite an image, you can get the favorites, and you can report. And all this stuff is in their documentation. Get votes, get votes, favorite, get favorites, and report. Oh, and get overview. I forgot about that one. Most of them require an API key, but the get one doesn't. So for today's example, we're just going to mess with the get. So I wrote a little class here. Let me just bring it in here. Create a new file. The cat API. So I just initialize these variables: cat API URL, get URI, and then I have a function in this class called get cat images, which takes a query. I set the default format query to XML because that's how I want to parse things in this plugin. And then I use WP get remote. So look at the HTTP API. It's a great little API built into WordPress. If you ever need to get something or post something to an outside site, this handles it beautifully. Basically, the typical way in a PHP developer's life is to use what's called curl, C-U-R-L. HTTP API does that for you, but it also checks any other possible ways it can do things. fdoc open, curl, and there's a couple others that I can never remember. I never have to deal with them. Curl is usually the best, I think. But HTTP API handles that for you. So all you have to do is say, get this URL, and WordPress does the magic for you. So in WP remote get. It asks for a URL, and args, or arguments, and things you can send with the arguments are like the method, the timeout, headers, body, cookies. And so the return value of wget-remote is going to be an array, which contains the headers. Basically what, when you go to a website, this stuff actually gets sent back to your browser. So WordPress is getting it and sending it as an array so you can parse it if you need to. And the body, response codes, cookies if they're there. So for our plugin, we're going to get remote, the cat API URL, and then the get URI, which is this API images get. Again, is all in the API documentation, API images get. And you'll see when we build our shortcode why we're doing it this way. There's a PHP function called HTTP build query. It takes an array and it turns that into a get string. So hello equals there, and fish equals food, and there equals looking. This is a HTTP query. So that would look like an array whose value equals there, multi variable array. Hello equals there, fish equals food, finger equals licking. And it just converts that to a query for you. And then there's this built-in PHP function called array filter. It removes any blank values in your array. So if you have image size and it's blank, it'll just remove it. WP get remote, since it's part of the WordPress API, can return a WordPress error. So the first thing I want to do is check to see, is there an error in the response? If there is, we're going to just return the error. There's a function get error message, and it will just display this on their screen. And sometimes you'll get an error like no HTTP transport, which means they don't have curl or sock open installed on their site, or one of the others. But if it's not an error, we want to just return the body. So again, if we look at this, this is the body. Alternatively, you could just say return response to the array body. But this is just a little bit easier. It uses their API and does whatever it needs to do. So that's the cat API. We upload this, and we need to include it. So let's just look here. Let's pick it up here. So I do include once, typical PHP function, and then plug in dir path and file. File is a PHP reference. The reference is the current file. Plug in dir path is another built-in WordPress function. It basically gets the path of your plugin directory. And the reason why this is useful is because if you change where WP content is located, then you can't specify, a plugin developer can't specify where that class is, or that class file is located. With this, it reports that correct value. So a plugin developer doesn't have to worry about that anymore. And if we upload this, nothing's going to change. Hopefully the site still works. It does. Now we want to add a shortcode that actually uses that API. Adding shortcodes is very simple. you just need to run a function called add shortcode. It takes two arguments, the shortcode name and the function it calls to process the shortcode. So I wrote a shortcode. We're going to call this catnip shortcodes.php. And, I added my PHP doc already from the package catnip. And it's version 1.0. My class is catnip shortcodes. Just like if function exists, you can do if class exists. So if there's another plugin that is called catnip and it has a class called catnip shortcodes, and it runs before this one, then this won't run. That could be good or bad for your plugin, but at least it won't cause the site to crash. And the main constructor, of course, in this class is catnip shortcodes. And all I'm doing is calling the function do catnip shortcode. With any shortcode, you can take attributes or arguments. So when I run do catnip shortcode through the add shortcode function, it automatically passes those values. And I'll show you what those look like in a minute. So we've already included our catnip API, the cat API in our main function file. So I'm just going to create a new version so I can access those functions. I want to get my options. Set the default output to blank. And these are my default arguments. API key, which I get from the options that we set. Default. If it's blank, then that's fine, it's blank. Image ID. If we look at the documentation, cat API, it explains it all. Image ID takes a string, the unique ID of the image that will return. If you want to specify a really cute picture of an image you like, get the ID of that image, stick it in the shortcode, post it on your page, and it will display. The format, we're not allowing people to change the format because we only want to accept XML. Results per page. You can display 100 pictures of cats on your website if you want, on one page. You have 100 pages with 100 pictures of cats. And they're all going to be random cats. So it's still going to be like cat heaven. But the default is 1. So you do need to specify 1 if you want more than 1. Also, if you were using source as your format, it would only return 1 because the source actually just dumps the file content to you. Really no good. I don't know why they have the default set to source. I think they should have the default set to HTML or XML. But whatever, I didn't like this. Yeah. Type. Say you only want JPEG images on your site for some reason, or you only want PNG images or GIF images. If you don't specify, it will return all types. You can't use the word all as a type. I tried this and it doesn't work. Blank equals all. JPEG equals JPEG, PNG equals PNG, GIF equals GIF. Category. Apparently there's only a few categories. Cats with hats, cats in space, cats in boxes, cats with sunglasses, and cats with ties. If you don't specify a category, then it's going to be all categories. Even categories that don't match these, I guess. Sizes. They offer 3 sizes. Small, which is a 250 pixel image, either 250 pixels wide or 250 pixels high. Medium is 500 pixels, and full is just the original size. The default is full. And then it also takes a sub ID, which will return if the sub ID matches a favorite or vote. So if you have a Twitter user and you're signed in, I guess, to the cat API with your Twitter user, and you love it. Actually, I have no idea how this works. Somehow it's associated with you. So you can say, I want only to get the pictures that I've marked in somewhere. And the default is none, so I'll get everybody's. So that's what I have here, my default. API key, image ID, results of page 1. Type, blank for all. And I commented all these things, by the way. Category, blank, size, default is full, sub ID is blank. Now there is a function in WordPress called shortcodes underscore attributes. It will take your defaults combined with the arguments passed by the user, combine them, and create a new array. Basically, it merges the array. It takes their arguments, overrides the default. And then I pass these arguments to get cat images, which is this query. It removes any blanks, fills the query, gets the XML output, returns the body of that output into this file called XML. Simple XML element takes a string, it's a PHP function. I believe you do need to have a certain PHP module to use this. It's not hard to enable them, though. So now I want to handle my output. First, for the sake of your users, add some markup. Especially if you're using this, in the plugin repository. Because if you just display it on a page in the shortcode and they want to style it a certain way, they're going to have a hard time styling it unless you have some specific things in there. So before I output my thing, I create a div. Class is catnip shortcode. That tells the user that this is what will output in the shortcode. Catnip images, I want to use that. Catnip image size. Probably shouldn't have that in there because if it's blank, it'll just be a blank thing. Oh wait, no, full is full, so that's good. Catnip image size, full. So if they want to handle full images different than they handle small images, they can do that with the CSS class. And then the way that this XML outputs, it's really deep. So this is an XML object. So for each XML data image as actually getting down to the core of this XML. Output, we want to do the div ID, which is the image ID, class, the cat API image, and then we want to link to the source URL, which is from the cat API, and then the image URL, which is the image. Close our div, and return the output. So I'll upload this, and because of the way that the shortcodes work in WordPress, and because I have it as a class, I need to include shortcodes, and I also need to do shortcodes. New catnip. Shortcodes. The file name is fine, but the class name is underscore. Yeah. Because dash is in the it may work in a class name, but in a variable, it treats it as like a subtraction. So I'll try to keep it as underscores for functions like that. All right, now let's go here. I created a catnip plugin page already because I've already created a plugin and uploaded it. This is a shortcode. If you've never seen one in WordPress, it's just a bracket, the shortcode variable, and end bracket. We update this, and view the page. It didn't work. Let me look at my example. Oh, maybe I didn't have. And there we go. And this is a full image. So, if we look at our shortcode, remember we have all these default variables. It's using all the defaults because I didn't pass anything. If I want to change it to 3 images, what is it? Num per page. Result per page. And let's do size small. I like that one. We'll remove this. And of course, I believe you can, I don't know how WordPress is going to handle that. I guess it doesn't. Any questions so far? Shortcodes are very easy. Basically, all you need to do is worry about what's being passed, set up defaults if you need to. Sometimes you don't need to. Run the shortcode attributes if you have defaults and attributes being sent. And then the complicated part really here is just creating the CAD API, making it work. And then returning that output. And that just returns it to your WordPress page. Now, slightly more complicated is adding widgets. You need to register a widget, which needs to be called during the WordPress's widgets_init action. And you need to extend the WP Widgets API class to create your new widget. So, just to refresh y'all, a widget is just appearance widgets. You can drag these over to your sidebars. These are all widgets. So we create a new file, widgets. So at the top of my file, I am running this add action widgets in it. So when WordPress runs that action, I want to register my catnip widgets. Register widget is going to look for this class that extends the WP widget, catnip widget, which is right here. And then there's 3 main functions you need to deal with in this class. The constructor, which you'll run WP widget on. So the way I do this, and you can do it a number of different ways, I have just an array of widget options. So the class name I want to use is catnip widget, description. It's cat or day every day in WordPress with the cat API. And that's translatable. Again, it's 2 underscores. And the widget, if we look at the actual widget class. This is the API. So in the widgets API, it talks about sidebars, but also widget functions. And we just registered the widget. I guess it doesn't say. I don't remember what the what catnip is. It must be just some identifier or something. This function, widget, is what displays on the front end when you add the widget over to your sidebar. It shows up here. We'll deal with that in a second. There's an update function, which gets called whenever you save a widget setting. So we drag a widget here. There's a save button, and this is what runs the update function. So first we're going to get into form. This is what displays the widget options in the dashboard. So again, the form displays this stuff. We have some defaults again. There's one difference. We have the default title, which is quite common in widgets. You just basically can have a title above the sidebar widget. So when I add search, the title is blank. I put search in that field and save it and refresh. It'll have a title search there. But you don't have to have a title. That lady is not naked. All right. Again, actually, I'm doing this wrong here. I need to get because I'm grabbing API key. So the default API key I want to use is whatever is set in there, but they can change it if they want. Again, they could change it in the shortcode. So if they had 3 API keys, they could do different things with different API keys. Image ID, again, if they want a specific image of a cat in their sidebar, they just specify the image ID. Results of page, type, category, size, sub-ID, all the stuff we talked about. I did make the default for the widget small size because it's a widget. It's usually just a little sidebar area. Now, there's a difference here. In our shortcodes, we ran shortcode attributes, or shortcode underscore acts, default attributes. Same thing with this WP parse args. It basically runs the same thing as the shortcode attributes. It's just 2 different functions in WordPress that do basically the same thing, except in reverse. In this one, you put the defaults first, and then the user settings. In this one, you put the user settings first, and then the defaults. So you have to be careful with this. PHP extracts just basically extracts everything from these arrays and creates actual variables with those values. And what that does is we are going to create all the different form fields for this widget. So first I create a label, and it's for get field ID title. So WordPress creates a field ID for title with this echo title, which is a translatable string. Again, if Russian people want to translate this, I don't know the Russian word for title, but they can send me the translation and I can include it. Input, this class is a default WordPress styling. Again, ID is title, which is for this label. So if they click on the label, it focuses on the input box. The name, and get field name title. Type of text value is going to be whatever either the default title is or whatever they set as a title previously. So it gets that value, and it's all stored in the database. We do the same thing for the API key. I did add a little extra text here. It gives you access to all the images, coding, favoriting, uploading, etc. And it's translatable string. Same ID for the sub ID, or same thing for sub ID. Again, same thing for image ID. The differences that we do is down here. Results per page. I decided I wanted that to be a select box. They can select 1 to 100. I don't want them to put 1,000 in there because it's not going to work, and I don't know how the API will handle that, if it will just fail, or if it will return 1, or if it will return 100. So just give them the option to select 1 to 100. So basically I created a label, a select, using the same get field ID, field name, field ID functions, and then a for loop 1 to 100 with this option value that changes. There is a helper function in WordPress called selected and checked, and what you can do is you can compare the saved value or the input value to a value in this array, and if it matches, then it will add the HTML code selected equals selected. I don't know if you guys ever mess with that, but it's very useful. So same thing with checked. It'll add the value of checked equals checked. And I think they have one for disabled, so if a certain parameter exists that you need a input box disabled because they select something else, you can use the helper function. So basically it's just output HTML. And that's the value, and these are all just 1 through 100. We do something similar here, no loop, but for image type, all images, which again is a blank value, JPEGs, PNGs only, GIFs only. And categories, I just use what they put: hats, face only, boxes only, sunglasses only, ties only, or all image categories. And image sizes, small, medium, or both. And by default, up here to small. So by default, small should be. So let's just upload this.
Here's small space boxes.
Small.
So your small, medium, full, your selected small space boxes. And then next.
It should be a medium and full. Thank you. Otherwise, the selected wouldn't work. The copy paste error. Thanks. So, because this is a second file we added, we could have added all these into the main file, but this just helps clean things up. We need to include this again. Widgets. We don't need to do a new here, because when we include this file, it's going to run this action, which runs register widget, which calls the class for us. So all we need to do is include the actual file.
And that would be normal. You'd always have that noise widget, right?
Yeah. I mean, you could, yeah, you could take this and put it here, and it would be the same thing as calling this new. Basically, all this is doing is saying new get widget. WordPress is just doing it for you. It doesn't do it with shortcodes. It's just so we included that, and now we go to widgets. Did I not upload this? There it is. Catnip widget. It's Saturday every day in WordPress. Cat API. By the way, this Saturday thing is just something to say where every day is Saturday. So if we look at our widgets, drag this over here. There's a title, random cats. We can put our API key if we want, our sub ID if we want, image ID. Choose all of these images if we want. Choose. Image types, hats, small images. We'll just save this. If we refresh, there's our two images in our sidebar. Now refresh again. And these are all linked. Actually, I talked about these forms, but when I click save, it goes to the update function, the new instance and the old instance. So these are the old settings, these are the new settings. I want to save the old instance into a function called instance, and this is basically doing the whole default thing. I run strip tags on these just in case they add any tags. But title, image ID, results, these are all the default settings. We don't have API key in here, so API key. And then what's actually being displayed is going to look very similar to our shortcode code. In fact, sometimes what I'll do is, depending on how I have the shortcode outputting information, I'll just get these arguments and pass them to the shortcode function and just get the output. But for our example, it's just easier. Again, we create a new API class, get our options. Probably don't need to get our options because we're not doing anything special there. Extract the arguments, which is in WordPress when you are outputting widgets, you can specify these arguments before title, after widget, before widget. Those are all in these arguments things. And that's part of what you do in a theme. And then this is the instance. These are our settings, our customized settings. So again, we get our cat images. We're just going to pass that instance array. It sends a XML string, which is parsed, send in this XML variable, and similar thing. The only thing I really changed here was catnip widget rather than shortcode. So if they wanted to, they could customize the way the widget works or looks versus the shortcode. And we have the same for each, same output. The apply filters, we haven't talked about filters, we've talked about hooks, but a filter allows you to change the value versus just doing something when something hits. So what we do here is it runs this widget title, and the default value is going to be the cat API if the title is blank. Otherwise, it's going to use the title. Also, the filter will send out the instance and the ID base. So somebody could create a filter in their functions.php that changes this behavior. Or if you wanted to, you could just completely ignore this and just set the title to be whatever the instance title is set to. That way they could have it blank if they wanted to. This won't actually allow blank without somebody doing a filter. Maybe we'll do that in a couple minutes. So if the output is empty, don't display anything because there's no code. There's no way that the output's going to be empty because I have these being set here. So that will never be empty. Echo before widget, that stuff is controlled by your theme, functions.php. If there's a title, display the title, echo the output, and then we're good. And that's what displays all this stuff. We are flying through this stuff. Are there any questions?
Why don't more of the people do it? Because they're like widget creating shortcuts.
I don't know. I really have no idea.
So it would be easy for us just for him to have shortcuts to actually widget that we want.
Yeah. Shortcodes are really simple. I would think anybody who created a widget would also create a shortcode. Maybe a lot of the times, I guess, developers suffer from they're creating a plugin that solves a problem they have. And the problem is, I really want this in a widget on my sidebar. They don't care. They don't want it they don't want a shortcode. They don't want it on a page. They just want it on a widget. So they just create a plugin that does what they want, and they upload it for everyone else to use. That's probably what is the case. Okay. So, if we wanted to submit this to the WordPress repository, which I did already, then we need a readme.txt, which I created. So contributors, this is your WordPress username on WordPress.org. Tags, cats, little cats, cat API, all this stuff. Example code. Requires at least 3.1. That's the WordPress version that requires. It probably would work. I mean, this is so simple. It would probably work on any version of WordPress. But I just put 3.1 in there because really, if you're not up to date on WordPress, you need to update. And if you want to use my plugin, which is very important, then you should update. Test it up to 3.4. Stable tag, this is version 1. This is the description with catnip and the cat API, cat a day every day in WordPress. So when somebody searches plugin repository, this is what they'll see. When they click on the link, they'll see this description, which just says what it does. It currently only gets images, and it's part of the free training offered at UGA. And installation instructions, frequently asked questions. Is it cat a day today? It is now. And changelog, this is just the first version, so its initial release is catnip. But since I've done some bug fixes in today's class, general bug fixes. So we're going to do this. Change this to version 1. Save it. Just to version 1. Save it. And I'm going to show you guys something. Alright. So we zip up the plugin. And then check out the developer pack and guidelines for submitting your plugin. Visit this page to add it. But before we do that, actually, we're having problems yesterday with the login. So developer FAQ just tells you basically things what you should do with your plugin. And then there is I never remember where it is. There it is, detailed guidelines. This is saying, you need to have your plugin be GPL version 2. If you don't put that in your plugin, it's assumed. And you can't obfuscate your code. That's actually against GPL. You can't do trialware. You can do serviceware. So a plugin in the WordPress repository is Akismet, and it's considered serviceware. The plugin is free. It's open source. But it doesn't work unless you subscribe to the service, the Akismet service. And if you're a business, you have to pay like $5 a year or something like that. So serviceware plugins are allowed, but you can't have a plugin that won't run without like an API key or something like that. That's not serviceware. It's like limiting the functionality of the plugin without the API key. And that's against GPL. You can't limit functionality in open source. Something like that. You can't send user information back to your servers. You can't send executable code to third-party systems. there's 18 of these things. And the thing that they got me on last time was I had more than 12 tags, considered gaming the search engine. But I fixed that, and they reinstated my plugin, and that particular plugin was serviceware, so it was pretty important for me to have it on the plugin directory because it's one of the ways that I earn money. And they have a thing about using subversion. So we'll click on this to open up. When you add your plugin, just give it the name of your plugin, description of what your plugin does, and then a URL where I just usually put the zip location, so I upload it to a site that I'm going to host the plugin at. And it's just a temporary location. And then I put that URL in there. And you submit it, and you'll have a list right under here of your plugins that are pending. And you'll get an approval notice like this. Hopefully. Sometimes it takes a day or two to get these. I got this in a few hours. So within an hour, you'll have access to SVN repository. So let's look at that. I use Tortoise SVN and Subweaver for my SVN client. It is really handy. I have all my plugins in this directory here. If I create a new folder called Cabinet, and then check out Cabinet, okay. Because Tortoise SVN already has my WordPress credentials, it's not asking me for my username and password, otherwise it would. Not everyone has the same rights to your WordPress subversion repository as you do. You have the right to make changes. They can download it using SVN, but they can't make changes. So if we look, there's 3 directories, branches, tags, and trunks. Trunk is where I keep my main, or where you should keep your main. Tag this is tagged as version 1.0.0, so you can have a historical thing. So if we look at another plugin that I have, and we go to, oh, they changed it. There you go. Under developers, you can download other versions. So you keep tagging these, and people can say, I want to see why 1.2 worked and 1.2.1 didn't work or something like that. They can look at all these. And just by clicking them, they're downloading the zip file. So it's just a good way for you to keep older versions. And all this stuff, the SVN, is hosted on WordPress's SVN server for free. So we made some changes. And now we're...
I'm sorry, general fund.
Where?
Yes, on this page.
The one on this page? Oh. Is that how you're supposed to Carl? Now you're making me confused. All right.
Saturday is not wrong, too.
Saturday?
Saturday.
That's tricky. Okay. So let's go to those files. Oh, wait a minute. Plugins. Oh. I forgot I created a new directory for this. WP training. Content, plugins, cabinet. These files, paste them here. And and you can see that I changed a bunch of files. An interesting thing about Taurus SVN, you can see a diff, which will show you the differences. So the only thing I changed here was the version number, which is all I want to change on that file. Short codes. This is just kind of a good way to make sure that what you're about to upload is good. So I just added an extra space there. If I wanted to, I could copy the and save it. And it will create a back file. Just leave it. And diff. With more screen real estate, really better. I added a space, so I like to have my spacing better. I added the get options here and removed the, no wait. I removed the get options and added the output. This is in the widgets. I added that API key, I forgot to add it last time. I added the get options here because I'm doing this, getting the default API key. And I changed those from space to medium and boxes to full. And then I have an extra space here, so I'll just copy that. Save this. README, not that important, but we can look at this. Change my stable tag, added my change log. I have another extra space, copying and pasting this text document. Spaces at the bottom. And this one, again, it's just a space issue. So if we save these, we'll see I really only changed 3 files, catnip widgets, and readme. I want to copy these and create the tags directory. 1.1. Paste them here. Alright, Taurus SVN add. And then we will commit. So one thing I like to do in my commits is, if it's an update, like just copy the last changelog entry I have in my readme.txt. And it will upload this to WordPress, and WordPress will do all the rest. It'll, it's like every 5 or 15 minutes, it checks for updates, it changes the website, their repository website, and it notifies WordPress site. If we look, your updates, I'll just update this so it's out of the way. Obviously, we don't see the new version, even though catnip is 1.0.0 on ours. It hasn't updated in the WordPress repository. So it still says 1.0.0 because it hasn't yet seen my changes. It's basically going to pull its Subversion repository to see if there's any changes.
Okay, so did you commit to their repository?
Yeah. So if you have your plugin on the repository and you make changes, you can use that Subversion to commit to their repository. And then the rest of the world who uses your plugin will get an update saying, hey, you can update this plugin to a new version. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. I thought it looked like you were committing to your own.
Yeah, it looks like that because it's on, it's on my computer. So the files exist on my computer, but when I run this Subversion commit, it's uploading those to their server. So there's actually two copies, one on mine and one on theirs. Theirs is what would populate the whole world. Whoever.
Is your repository linked to this?
Basically, it's part of Subversion. And there's some good documentation on Subversion, SCN, on the WordPress, how to use it, terminology.
Did you rate your own plugin? Oh, you're rating one.
Catnip? Yeah, I submitted it yesterday. What's the rating?
Ah.
No, that's the one I did.
There are 30 downloads there.
Are there?
There are 30 downloads.
Yeah. So another cool thing is you can see the stats of the plugin. Historical stats. 18 people downloaded this thing today.
That's not unique. Everybody prefers computers.
It's for IP,
It's for IP.
which is confusing because you could have, with shared hosting, you could have 50 sites on one IP and they all download the plugin. It only counts as one for the day.
I've used a lot of the tricks like that.
Another thing that's confusing about this is if you have it 1.0 and you upgrade 1.0.1 the next day, it counts as a download. So it's not unique in the sense that in the sense of this one, it's 18 people downloaded because it's unlikely they downloaded on several different sites and several different IP addresses. But a year down the road, with several updates, whenever they update it, that counts as a download. So you see plugins, like the popular plugins, there's 1.25 million downloads of all-in-one SEO pack. That's not unique people. That counts uniques, that counts people updating, that counts people adding it to several sites with different IP addresses. It's
There's
a
a
little
class
bit,
of 30 changes.
right. So one thing you can do if you want to game the system is make small updates every other week or something like that. Now, say that, but in the developer guidelines, it says something about updates. Frequent commits can be seen as gaming the recent updates list. So try to limit commits to prevent this. So whenever you update a plugin, it goes to recently updated. So there's catnip. I mean, if there's a good reason, if you actually caused a serious bug, then fine. But if you're updating it every day and you're showing up on this recent updates list, this is one way people are going to say, ooh, I want to see this, because obviously this developer is actively updating this plugin. So we got this. Subweaver is just a Dreamweaver plugin, so I can do similar things here with Subweaver. I don't use that too much. The only real time I use Subweaver is for personal Subversion repositories I have, because I don't want to commit something to the WordPress repository until I've fully tested it. So I would recommend following that advice. And let's look at some more cats before we move on. Oh, look at that. My site is broken. Yeah. I don't know if I can commit that. Alright. Well, I guess I should have tested before I updated it. Let's look at the logs. What am I doing? Remove that, but that shouldn't make a difference. I don't think I have any options. Oh. Sure, if it's my other plugin. Doesn't make any sense. There's something with that sidebar. No. Errors. Let's change this. Display the errors.
Are you gonna show us anything else today, or just plugins and widgets?
We have MU plugins, and that's about it. I can show you MU plugins real quick if you want me to. Oh, something with this XML.
It's a bad cat.
Shortcodes.
I did. Where's that guy with the big hair? You see that one?
I don't see that.
Really scary.
Why does that look like my cat? Did it look? It looked nothing.
Alright, let's look at the shortcodes. I did something on here. I don't think I should have. New shortcode array 49. This is weird. Well, there's more than one way to skin this cat. We'll just copy these. Upload. Well, that's really weird. All of a sudden, it doesn't work. It just... Must be something with my server. Because no, nothing has changed here. Alright, whatever. I'll deal with this later. So let's just deactivate. But we do see that there's an update for my plugin now. So we'll update it. I don't think it's the plugin. I think it's something with my server because it's not working on my other site where it was working this morning. And I didn't make any changes to this stuff. Alright, so let's continue. New plugins. MU plugins. MU used to mean multi-user plugins. You can add a directory in WP-content called MU-plugin. And the reason for that was WordPress, there used to be two different versions of WordPress. WordPress single user, or just basic normal WordPress install like we did today. And there was a branch of that called WordPress multi-user, WordPress MU. And that is what is now known as WordPress multi-site. And it was a different branch, and so there was this MU-plugins, which meant multi-user plugins. Now means must-use plugins. It's basically, you'd only really want to use it in multi-site installations, but you could use it on your own personal site too. It's basically anything in that directory is activated no matter what any user tries to do. So, I believe I'm logged in here. Maybe I've already done it. Train, content. I don't know why it's not showing up. That's part of it. Alright, so in a normal WordPress installation, you'd have this black bar because you're logged in. Maybe I disabled it here. Put a check mark on show toolbar when doing the site. I believe that's on by default. So you see this black bar when you're on the site. Normal users that just come to your site, if they're not logged in, they won't see that. If you want, you can disable this for all the users on your site. So you can create a directory, MU-plugins, and then create a file. We'll just call this disable black bar. And this is a filter. So when WordPress runs the show admin bar filter, we're going to run this function. This is a built-in function. It just returns the value false. That's all the function does. So if we upload this, and even though I have this checked, I refresh, that goes away. Some people don't like that black bar. Some people think it confuses their users. So if you have like a membership site, you can disable that black bar so people don't see any of that stuff. They only see what you want to see, basically. And that's an example of a filter. Again, it's mostly used in a multi-site environment. You could use it in a membership site environment. And the next thing.
With that filter, can you filter by users so that certain administrators see the bar, but all the other ones?
Yeah, so in that function here, you could just do like if has capability. manage options. Actually, it's not. Upload this. I don't know if this can work. Yeah, it's not the right function. No. Yeah. I generally don't close my PHP because sometimes you run into weird white space issues, or PHP won't work properly because there's white space or something. So, you don't have to close your PHP. I don't know if that's the best practice. I should never do.
I was told plugins, but look for the activate them with them. That's the first log from a multi-site as well.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not it's because it's just activated across the board for everything when I was installed plugins from the multi-site. But it wasn't through. It wasn't a new plugin, like it's something I actually uploaded to my plugin folder.
Yeah.
So is there some other setting that developer put in that plugin that broadcasts it to everything on the site?
Well, what normally happens is if you add a plugin to your plugins directory, it will show up on all the sites. It won't be activated. Depending on where you activate it, if you activate it in the network settings, there's network activate, which will activate it on all the sites. If you don't do that, then you can go to each individual site and activate it individually.
I might go look at that.
Yeah, we'll go over that next week anyway. Anyway, just Dave, you can. I just don't know off the top of my head. So let's talk about donating. There's several links here that this was a big topic last year, basically. Plugin developers make your life easier, and a lot of them don't get any sort of money for it. I personally, I donate to any plugin author, $5 who has a plugin that I think is important, that I don't think I could live without on my site. The reason for that is a plugin developer is trying to make money to feed their family or themselves. If they're not making any money keeping their plugin up to date, it's going to go on the back burner. There's not much incentive unless they have their own personal incentive, like for their own site. So I just like to throw developers $5 if I use their plugin. And then WordPress is completely free. And my personal stance is if you're making money from WordPress, either you have a business that runs on a WordPress website or you're a developer doing WordPress stuff, you should donate to the WordPress Foundation. Now, the WordPress is backed financially by Automatic. The founder of WordPress is the founder of Automatic. And backed by WordPress.com, which generates revenue with ads. So if you create a WordPress.com site, you have the ads injected in your content, unless you pay. So they're probably not in need of a lot of money, but I actually donate monthly to them. And then next week, we're going to go over WordPress multi-site. We're going to talk about enqueuing JavaScript, CSS, and using Ajax in your plugin. Ajax is pretty interesting in WordPress. There's some built-in stuff, and it's different on the front end than it is on the back end. Actually, I think a little easier on the back end, the admin area. We'll discuss a couple more advanced APIs, like the transient API, which is interesting. More on internationalization, which we'll do with the Catnip plugin. And then if you guys have any questions or any things that you think of over the week that you really want answered about WordPress, then that'll be the time to take those questions. Any questions for today? All right. Great.